and animating movies and adding special effects to it and all like that. Just some fun facts about movies next time. Okay, the Avengers made $1.5 billion in gross domestic revenue, or not domestic, international revenue. That's all the money they got back from making the movie. And a dollar bill is 6.14 inches. And if you have 1.5 billion of those dollar bills, and you line them up right next to each other, it would wrap around the equator 5.87 times. That's how much money they made. And they only spent about 170 million, so 2 million. That's just some other information, the money they made. Next. Okay. So, when the surveys asked y'all what y'all wanted to know, and a couple of questions for special effects artist salary. The median salary for 2012 was $61,370. And there's so many jobs involved with this career that you can go and you can specialize in just about many things. Like there's sculptors, there's painters, there's fashion designers, there's seamstresses, there's computer nerds, there's engineering, there's tons and tons of things. You can be an architect major and you can work with this. It's really good. Next. Oh yeah, and actors determine their salary based on how many people they pull in, like based on who they are and their track record, so to speak. Okay, and this was the audience poll. I only got 11 cards back, so which means 4 of them are not entered, but this is saying that 2 people said that they had knew about 4, 0 being low and 10 being high for sort of information. Next. Okay, first I'm going to talk to you about how to build a set, and then later I'm going to talk to you about how to build a character, and then later I'm going to talk about green screens and like Avengers movie. So what happens with they're making a set, they draw a little building, some artists kind of great, and they're like, okay, we want a roof. And then the artist goes in and does all the things, does all the shading, and then you have someone that sculpts it out of clay or foam, and they make it, and then they put a box around it, kind of like this, to make the mold of it, and they pour things in there to make it harden and stay good and everything. So then once that's done, they take each piece and they make different pieces about them. They make like 20 pieces to create this giant like world for which one they film in. And they go through and they paint every single little piece. And they get a whole entire like world from that corner to this corner, sometimes even bigger, sometimes as big as this room. And they have to go by and make everything. Nothing is really computer made. You know, they do 3D printing later, but that's something that's next. Okay, yeah, and while someone's creating the individual buildings, they have another person make the landscape, and they take like clumps of moss and they glue it onto the hills to make like bushes, because it's supposed to be in like a distance kind of view. And then yeah, when they go to film it, they have a director of photography who sets up a camera and they have it floating above the thing, and they just send it through and along all these different angles and everything, and they have a computer that records the movements so that they can reenact it and redo it at any point in time. Jeez. Okay, so when they create a character, it's kind of like how they make the set. They draw it out, make it into clay, sculpt it, whatever, but then they scan it into the computer by putting these little dots like on corners and special places of protrusions and intrusions or whatever into the character. And once they scan it in, they individually put wiring all around the character in different ways, shapes and forms, and that allows them to move each and every single piece and connects it together. And then once that's done, for the computer, they go on and they add texture and all that, but they also make a 3D printout, and it has a little plastic thing that as it scans, it's adding on and adding on and adding on. And they have that. They insert eyeballs into it so it can move around and look around, and then they paint it. There's just tons and tons of hard work. And then they build like a pretty decent sized set. It's like for each scene, because they have the world and then they have the individual like houses and whatever. It'll be about this tall to the floor, and they have a little doll about this big that they put in, and they put them in at each and every single angle to try and get all kinds of viewpoints and everything in there. And yeah, we can talk about green screens. So this is the Avengers. when you watch a movie, you don't really think, you know, this is a green screen. You're like, oh, that's cool. They're blowing up New York. Everything's brawling. But I don't know. When I was watching it, they said that this was Discovery and a couple other websites and everything. Said that most of Iron Man was computer animation. They don't actually have a full suit, and if they do, it's not actually worn by Tony Stark because it'd be too heavy for him. And this is how they made the Hulk. They put him in this really weird suit, and they have dots on there to correlate with the Hulk's movements. And they have him just walking around being all goofy and exaggerating his movements because the Hulk is so muscular that he has to pretend he's that muscular and walk around like a goof and everything. So this is when Thor is fighting the Hulk, just some guy in a weird suit. This is the end. And if you notice on his arms, he actually has little dots because they just computer animate his whole suit. And what they do with greenskins is they just kind of copy and paste. They go in and make their own digital set and world, and they just post it in there. And yeah, that's about it. Nice. These are my citations and sources that I got. They've got tons and tons of videos on YouTube of all this stuff. But yeah, I hope that you know a little more and you can appreciate all the hard work that goes into making a movie next time you do it, and not just taking it as what it is. Thank you.